These Republicans were not happy with how Trump is being treated.
If a government can do this to the President of the United States, they can do it to you as well. You need to be scared.
Somehow I'm not scared? I just don't think that the average American is scared that they're going to lose their job for withholding military aid for Ukraine.
It was via satire like that one Ukrainian soldier on the front lines apparently learned that the U.S. had withheld vital military aid, according to a BuzzFeed report from Ukraine. And we quote, "The news made him angry. The fighting was hot at the time, and he and his fellow soldiers were stuck with mostly crappy old gear. For Kiev, it had a chilling effect that spread through the Ukrainian capital, where stunned officials began questioning their longtime allies' commitment. Their morale suffered, and they felt vulnerable and abandoned by their biggest supporter." The human impact of Trump's actions, which ultimately led to the ongoing impeachment inquiry, was underscored by U.S. diplomat David Holmes during his testimony this week.
As we sit here today, Ukrainians are fighting a hot war on Ukrainian territory against Russian aggression. This week alone, since I have been here in Washington, 2 Ukrainian soldiers were killed and 2 injured by Russian-led forces in eastern Ukraine, despite a declared ceasefire. I learned overnight that 7 more were injured yesterday.
With us tonight, we're pleased to welcome back to the broadcast Admiral James Stavridis, an Annapolis grad who spent 30 years in the U.S. Navy, retiring at the rank of 4-star admiral, former head of the U.S. Southern Command, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He was last on this broadcast to talk about his new book, Sailing True North: 10 Admirals and the Voyage of Character. Admiral, thanks for coming on again tonight. What more can the intel community do if Dr. Fiona Hill looks at that committee and a national audience begging them not to pass along a story started by Russia that Ukraine somehow meddled in our election? The intel committee has now briefed the Senate. Please don't pass along this Russian propaganda. And yet our president did just that on a live television interview this morning.
Indeed. Let's start with Fiona Hill herself, Brian. When I was preparing to be the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, I kind of went on foot patrol around the circuit talking to experts. Everybody said to me, this was 7 or 8 years ago as I was preparing for that 4-year assignment, you've got to talk to Dr. Fiona Hill. So I've known her well over a decade. She is rock solid. She's an immigrant to this country, was born in northern England. She's literally the daughter of a coal miner's daughter, the Dolly Parton line, PhD from Harvard, a career civil servant who has come in and out of government. I would take her word over anybody's in a situation like this. And I'll tell you what, Brian, she doesn't back up to anybody. She is someone who will speak the truth to power. That's what you saw her do in her very powerful testimony.
As a man who has served in theaters where military aid becomes real, where weapons are used as the end product of policy, what do you tell a nation like Ukraine, having suffered losses of 14,000 and in the middle of this horrible grinding conflict with an aggressor like Russia?
Well, I would start by saying I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we even hinted at holding back military aid that we had promised. And I am certain, and I had been to Ukraine many times, Brian, as Supreme Allied Commander, I would go there. Why? They're not members of NATO, but they are partners with the United States and with NATO. There are Ukrainian troops who served alongside our NATO troops in Afghanistan. There were Ukrainian sailors at sea helping us conduct counter-piracy missions. They've been very strong allies, partners, and friends to NATO and the United States. I think even a hint of withholding that aid deserves an apology to them. And then secondly, it helps us understand why these career civil servants, career military officers like Lieutenant Colonel Lindman are willing to jeopardize their entire career, step out into the glare of publicity to speak truth to power. And they do so because they know how desperately Ukraine needs and deserves that military assistance.
Admiral, what must our other allies think of us after a week like this in the public domain, out in the open on live television?
Well, let's kind of do it from the inside out, Brian. First of all, what do all of us inside the United States think about this? And we've got to question this whole idea that we would take a vital foreign policy objective and undermine it with domestic political concern. That ought truly concern us inside the country. Outside the country, our allies will question, are we really here for them? And let's spin to the Pacific for 30 seconds, where we are saying to the Japanese and the Koreans, we're going to require you to pay billions of dollars in addition to the billions you already pay to have U.S. military support. Are they going to be content with the idea that we'll be reliable in that regard? And then lastly, Brian, it's what do our enemies think of this? And let me tell you, they are popping the champagne corks in Moscow right now. See that recent story about how they tried to frame Ukraine as the perpetrator on the 2016 election attacks. Boy, it's a good week for Vladimir Putin. It's a bad week for our allies.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.